everyone, the holidays are fast approaching and I have a great, really useful project for you today. I'm going to teach you how to make a basic tree skirt to fit any tree. So for today's project, I have designed this pattern for a basic tree skirt, and it includes 4 standard sizes that have all the supply lists for those different sizes in the pattern. I'm going to show you today how to make a 36-inch tree skirt, which is for like a 4 to 5 foot tree, and easier to show on this table here, but the method is exactly the same whether you're making a small one or a large one. So let's dive right into that. For the 36-inch, like I said, you are going to need 1.25 yards of whatever fabric you choose for both the back and the front. So if you're using the same fabric throughout, you'll need 2.5 yards total. You're also going to need some interfacing, and remember it's only 20 inches wide, so we need 2 1/8 yards of that for our 36-inch size. So grab that, grab a nice sharp pair of scissors, and let's go ahead and get started. All right, so up first, I have cut a 38-inch square of my fabric, and I picked this beautiful plaid, which I think will look so great under my Christmas tree. And I just want to show you here, I have 2 cuts of my interfacing. This is 20 inches, the full width of the roll, by 36 inches, and I've just butted up right next to this 16-inch by 36. So it's going to be, you know, about 1 inch all the way around inside from the edge of the fabric, and that's what we're looking for. And you really just want it close to add some stability to the fabric, but don't fuss if it's, you know, not perfect. We don't have to worry about that. And so I have folded it right sides together in half, and I'm going to go ahead and fold it in quarters. And then I'm going to take this over to the ironing board, since I've already fused this in place, and I'm just going to crease my lines so that they're nice and sharp. So let's go ahead and bring this over here, because we are going to use these fold lines quite a bit as we're making our tree skirt. So we want them to stay as accurate as possible. You don't really want any wrinkles or rumples underneath there while you're working. So just take your time and make sure everything is laying nice and smooth. All right, so now we have that ready to go. I've creased my 2 sides here, and now we can start marking out our circle for our tree skirt. So for this size, I know I need 18.5 inches from this point to the outer edge. So I have just taken a piece of twill tape that I had lying around. I've tied it to a pin here, and then I measured on my cutting mat to make sure that I had that 18.5 inches that I'm looking for. So that's ready to go. I'm actually going to rotate this to make it a little easier on myself. This is my folded corner where all of my layers come together. And so we can either put a pin in here. We just don't want this to be shifting a whole lot. So I'm going to pin that right on that outer corner. And we are just going to use our pin, and we are going to mark our quarter circle. And so you just want to take your time and kind of keep this as taut as possible. And so we're just going to slowly make our way around. Make sure I'm not slipping here. There we go. If you need to backtrack a little bit, that's okay. Just take your time and get it as accurate as you can. Because we're drawing this by hand, it's just naturally going to have a little bit of wiggle to it, but it's all going to work out in the end. All right. So you are going to repeat everything that I've shown you, the exact same steps with whatever you're using for your backing. So you're going to mark them both in the exact same way. But now that we have this done, I'm just going to cut this out right on the line that I marked. I also want to point out that in the pattern, there's a little template for the inside circle. So while I have this folded, I am going to go ahead and mark this one as well. So I'm just going to line that up on that inside circle. And again, use my pin to just trace that outer edge. There we go. Good to go. All right. So now I'm going to cut this out and I'll meet you back here when that's all done. All right, so I have cut out my circle. I have both the front and the back. I used the same fabrics for both, but obviously you could use something different if you'd like, or if you just have some muslin you want to throw on the back, that's easy. So now we're going to set these aside for just a minute and we're going to prepare our ties. So to do that, from our same fabric, we are going to cut a 2-inch by 12-inch strip for each tie that we need. For this size, I need 6 ties. And so let's start by just taking this to the ironing board, and we're going to press this in half and then fold each of those raw edges into the center. So let's do that over here. All right. I always like to give it a good press at the beginning. And then we can just line up our edges. Just like so. And now we can fold in each raw edge to that center crease line. There's one. And flip it around. At the beginning, it sometimes looks a little wonky, but once we get these creases in place, we can press it all nice and flat. There we go. All right, and so then I'm just going to tuck those in. So now my raw edges are all inside, and I'll give this another good press. Oops, make sure that little tail is tucked under. All right, and so now this end is being tricky on me. There we go. I'm going to make it behave. There we go, much better. So now we can take this to the machine and we can do some top stitching to secure this. So I am just going to do this first line of stitching right by this edge here, probably just an 1/8 inch away. And just for some continuity, I'm going to go down the other side. I think that gives us a really nice finish. All right, there we go. That turned out nice. You know what I just realized though? I forgot to tuck in one of the ends. So if you do this correctly, you'll tuck in one of the ends so that it's finished. But we can just roll this. This is not a problem that is impossible to solve. And so I'm just going to roll that under 1/4 inch and 1/4 inch again. And then I'm just going to top stitch. And guess what? It's going to be just fine. Let me stitch across here. Voila, problem solved. Okay, so let me trim my threads. And now we have all of our ties complete. I've made 6 of those, and so now let's go back to our big circles that we cut out. And so the next step is along one of these crease lines, we are going to cut right on that crease. And so make sure your scissors are nice and sharp. You don't want to have to work too hard at this. So I'm just going to open this up so I can see that fold. That's why we really take the time at the beginning to make sure it's obvious for us. And we're going to cut right on that crease from the outside edge all the way to the center. just like so. All right, and so now I'm gonna open this up so I can kind of see my whole circle. It is looking great. And so I want the right side to be facing up towards me, and then I'm gonna take my ties that I have here and some pins, and we're gonna start pinning things into place. And so let's make sure I want my raw edge going towards the raw edge of my fabric. And so I'm gonna pin this in place. And then I want the opposite side to line right up with that. Just like so. And then I'm just gonna put one farther down here at the bottom. I wanna make sure I'm at least like 1.5 inches away from this inside corner and this bottom edge as well. I'm just eyeballing. Feel free to measure if you want. Okay. There we go. And then now that I have the top and bottom, I'm just going to put these last set of ties in the middle of those two, just to help make sure they're evenly distributed. There we go. You do want to make sure your pins are far enough away. We're going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance when we sew all of this together. So just double check and make sure nothing is going to be too close. I'm going to move this one out a little bit more just for comfort. And the last thing I like to do is these ties down here at the bottom, they run the greatest risk of running into this outside edge when we're stitching. So I'm just going to fold these up out of the way and put another pin in them. Just because we want to make it as easy on ourselves as possible. All right, there we go. Now our ties are all set, and we can open up the other side of our tree skirt, and we can sandwich this together. We're going to put the right side down on this one. So I always kind of start by lining up my middle and these little edges here. And I'm actually going to grab some clips just to save some time. There we go. And then I'm going to take my time and I'm going to clip all the way around this. We are going to leave an opening. I like to leave it kind of in between two of the ties just because it's easier than on a curve. But if that makes you nervous, you just need about 6 to 8 inches that we can turn this right sides out. So make sure you have a mark to remind you to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and pin all of this, clip it in place, and I'll meet you back here. All right, so remember I mentioned earlier, because we're drawing these quarter circles by hand, they can get a little bit off. So I want to show you, mine has done just that. But don't be alarmed, this is not a big deal. This is very forgiving. And so I am just going to take my scissors, and I've got, this is this piece that ended up smaller, and I'm just going to follow it and trim off this excess. And you just want to keep it as flat as you can while you make your way around, because we want it to line up. But this is really more forgiving than you think it's going to be, so please do not fret. We just want a circle in the end. And if it's a little ovally, it's probably not the end of the world either. Finished is better than perfect, as Jenny says, right? All right, just gonna rotate this a bit, keeping my layers nice and smooth. Just to get them closer. There we go, that looks good. And now I'm gonna do the same thing on this other side. Just trim it up a bit. And this is part of why, you know, we cut our square a little bigger. We just give ourselves a little bit of extra room to work here. That is close enough. Remember, we're taking a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So as long as I have it close and I know that I can catch it all in the seam, I'm good to go now. And so now I can add a few more clips to keep this from shifting. So I'm just going to add that throughout. This is one of those steps that you'll be grateful you took the time for. There we go. Okay. Again, I like to try and keep it as flat as possible just to make sure I'm not getting any weird stretching or anything like that. So I'm going to finish this up, and once I have this all clipped, we'll take this to the sewing machine. All right, so I have this all clipped together exactly how I want. I'm going to start on this inside straight edge so that I can remember to leave my opening. So I'm going to do that now so I don't forget. So I'll sew straight just past where I can feel that tie, back stitch, come just to the other side of where this tie starts, back stitch, and then I'm going to make my way all the way around. So let's go ahead and get started. So remember, we're looking for that 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to move my needle over until I have that. That looks great. Move this up out of the way just a bit, and I'm going to grab this little case so I can put my clips away as I go. All right, here we go. So again, there I am just past that first tie, back stitching. And I'm going to move down here to right before that next opening, or the next tie, I should say. Back stitch. And now I'm just going to continue down to this corner and all the way around. So you can just follow along while I do that, and I'll meet you back here at the end. All right, we have made our way all the way around. So let's just go ahead and look at that, make sure everything was caught. It looks really good. All right, so now we are going to snip these inside curves just to make this lay down easier for us. Just make sure you're not clipping through your stitches. So just put a few in there just to help that fabric ease into that circle. It will give us a nicer finish in the end. There we go. I'm also going to cut out some of the bulk here in these corners. So I'm just going to cut off that point. And I'm going to do the same thing down here. Just whatever we can do to have a nicer finish. And so I didn't find that I needed to trim the outside ones or clip the outside curve, but you know, you can turn it right sides out and check. If you aren't happy with it, feel free to flip it back and put some clips in there or some snips in there. And so now remember, there's pins in here, so be careful. But we are going to start turning this right sides out. So we're just going to feed this through our opening, take our time. We don't want to pop any seams. So I will get this all turned the right way and meet you back here. All right, I've got this all turned right sides out. I've taken out all of my pins so I won't get poked anymore. And now I like to use one of these little turning tools or, you know, a stiletto or whatever you have. I just want to push out these corners so that they're nice and crisp. Remember, you've got one at the top of the opening and the bottom on each side. So I just want to take the time to make sure that those are going to lay really nice Then we have to reach all the way through to the other end. There we go. And this is where, you know, trimming off that bulk like we did earlier makes all the difference, because then it just lays so nice. There we go. Get this last little corner here. Perfect. All right. And so now we're just going to do a lot of, you know, kind of maneuvering this edge as we press it over at the ironing board. So I like to kind of just roll it between my fingers so I get that really nice crisp edge along the seam. And you can totally run along that with the turning tool as well if that's easier for you. This is just the method I always use. So then once I have this all done, we'll have this ready to top stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of all this and we'll be ready to go. Okay, so we have this all pressed. I've top stitched all the way around our outside edge, up the, you know, the center lines with our ties, and of course around the middle. And that top stitching just helps to secure those ties to make sure they're really nice and stable in there, and just gives us a beautiful finish. And so that's really it. Now you know the basics of making your own tree skirt. I do want to point out this really cute one that I made back here out of Cuddle. I think it just turned out so good. And so I use this really beautiful Cuddle that has this silver sparkle. And then I do want to remind you that just because you put Cuddle on the top doesn't mean you have to use Cuddle on the back. So I just used some standard quilting cotton on the back of that and for the ties. So there's lots of options. Of course, you could embroider or applique on these as well. So use your imagination and hopefully it will help you deck the halls. I can't wait to see what you make, and I'll see you next time on At Home. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching At Home. We're so excited to be almost 1 million quilters strong here at Missouri Star. And so if you haven't already joined our family, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can be notified of all of our future tutorials, and we'll see you soon.